what happened in the 1980s so that everyone everywhere of all ages started getting fat? These lines, they're hard to see with the projector, but basically around here in the 70s coming into the 80s, all ages, everyone started getting fat. So in engineering, and again, I was 25 years in complex problem solving, which is multi-factor complex issues leading big teams. And it ain't easy, but you got to have a lot of discipline. But when something like that happens, you actually smile because you say, we're going to have this in no time. Because when everything falls out of bed together suddenly, that's what you dream of, because those problems are relatively easy to solve. Whereas when things slowly decline and come and go, and they're not consistent and they're intermittent, those can be really subtle and complex and interacting variables working together sometimes, not others. But long story short, this would be easy, and it actually is easy. We know what happened. And there's hundreds of millions of people around the world who are asking the question, or should be, or maybe they don't think of it. They just think it's my genetics. They should be asking, well, what exactly was it? Maybe can I go back and use that knowledge and reverse it? And let me ask you something. If the rule you followed brought you to this, of what use was the rule? Quite powerful. And of course, we know now the dietary guidelines and the shift to vegetable oils for heart health and the shift to, healthy whole grains, which really meant refined carbohydrate wheats, which the food industry absolutely was orgasmic when the scientists suddenly told them that the two cheapest ingredients on the planet that cost nothing, vegetable oils and refined grains, were now healthy. So the food industry said, and that was the explosion of processed food. The guidelines actually advised going to a processed food hellhole. And the guidelines people would say, oh, we meant healthy whole grains and unprocessed. Rubbish. Once they said whole grains were good and wheats were good, they let the genie out of the bottle. Pandora's box was opened, and when we know what happened. But he just published this paper, 48 individuals in corporate settings, and they put them on a ketogenic, very low-carb diet without calorie control. They just told them how they could eat, advised them, bit of support. And they managed to get, with 49 patients actually, nearly a metric ton of weight was lost between the 50 people in, I think it was a 12-month interval. And you can see the rapid collapse in weight. Now, some people didn't lose so much weight, and you can get insulin-sensitive obesity where your body really doesn't want to lose weight and you're not that unhealthy. And also some people are not adherent, even if they say they are. I mean, that's human nature. So there's going to be varied results, but generally massive reduction. And the results in terms of the medical side were extraordinary. There were truly massive reductions in triglycerides, which is the real bad cholesterol in your cholesterol panel. LDL doesn't really mean much. CRP, inflammatory marker, blood pressure, and liver enzymes, which are crucial. So we don't just have an epidemic in the US of fatty liver disease, non-alcoholic, in adults. That came decades ago. There's now an epidemic in children of fatty liver disease. So to Werner's point, the youngest type 2 adult onset diabetic in the world a few years ago was in the newspaper. The kid was 3 years old. And when very obese, but Korean, and when they went in, they said it has to be type 1 diabetes, autoimmune, because 3 years old. No, it's type 2. The insulin was through the roof, not missing. So the world is gone insane, as Werner said. A massive increase in HDL, the good cholesterol. Now, this is very meaningful. This HDL, good cholesterol, means a lot. And there was no change in LDL. So they went high fat, low carb, got amazing results, and their LDL didn't even go up. So even that's partially a myth that the LDL will really change much on a high fat diet. So you see, the mythology is true everything. It's opposites day in nutrition world, right? So fantastic result, 16% average weight loss. But the bottom line, if we look at it, just to re-emphasize, we're worried about the causes of death in the world and morbidity and quality of life collapse and long-term end-of-life care, as opposed to staying quite healthy and maybe suddenly declining and passing like would be, hundreds of years ago. So we look at the breakdown of the causes of death. So over a third is heart attack and stroke. This is the biggest cause of death. Cancer is now pushing up behind it for sure. So that's a huge one to focus on. Kidney disease, diabetes type 2, and Alzheimer's, which is type 3 diabetes. So the diabetes cluster, where the death is attributed to that, another big chunk. Now, most of these are also diabetic driven, but they're not called that. They should be, but they're not. So over half in total. Cancers, most of the solid tumor cancers and the big killers in cancer, breast, colon, endometrial, the big killers that make up most of the cancer death, they're all intimately linked to insulin resistance, which is type 2 diabetes. So here you can see where this is going. And chronic respiratory, COPD, it's a hallmark of insulin resistance diabetes. It's almost diagnostic. COPD is almost diagnostic of highly insulin resistant person. So basically most of the pie relates to what we're talking about, insulin resistance. And then we've got accidents. Well, can't help you with that. Just be careful there, guys. And in here we've got the rest, flus, colds, coronavirus, and everything else is in this slice, which kind of gives a sense of perspective, perhaps. So let's address this risk. So let's look at it. This is me in 2013 in Singapore. I was in a crab meat place, very good. Engineer took the picture. I was very angry. I was quite a bit heavier. And I just discovered what I'm going to show you, what the root cause of disease, obesity, and everything was. So I was just about to embark on my journey of change. And it was a pretty big one. What I found out, because I had serum ferritin, GGT, and cholesterol were all crazy wrong. I didn't really know what they meant. I quizzed the doctor. What are the implications of these measures? Because I could see I was up at 2 or 3 sigma in the normal distribution of humans. They were way high, so I didn't know what they were, but I knew they were a problem. And they were standard blood tests, so I said, it's not like I got some weird blood test. What astonished me was the doctor was very vague. And as a leader in problem solving, I often have to interrogate leaders when I'm brought in to fix a problem when it's not getting fixed. And you got to be diplomatic, there's a lot of people stuff involved. But you do have to grill the leader and find out what they know. Do they know what they're doing? And clearly this doctor couldn't help me. I knew from the answers. Just wasn't really sure. Talked about whole grains and maybe lower your fat. And I knew that couldn't be anything to do with it. And I went to 2 more doctors and a professor of medicine who I was connected to, and astonishingly the same problem. They gave me some tips and some things worth checking, but they didn't know. This is amazing. So I hit the books for 3 or 4 weeks and found out this. I found out without question that my problem was excessive carbohydrate. I mean, I didn't have any question because I'd gone through at this stage hundreds of published papers, and I did the root cause classic process, and I came to the irrefutable, in my mind, conclusion. I was excessive carbohydrate and I needed to take all the carbs and sugars out immediately. And that meant I'd be eating a lot of high-fat food, by definition. You take out all the carbs and all the sugars, protein and fat are left. So I switched to eating basically lamb chops and meat, fish, and eggs mostly. I mean, I didn't have any question because I'd gone through at this stage hundreds of published papers, and I did the root cause classic process, and I came to the irrefutable, in my mind, conclusion. I was excessive carbohydrate and I needed to take all the carbs and sugars out immediately. And that meant I'd be eating a lot of high-fat food, by definition. You take out all the carbs and all the sugars, protein and fat are left. So I switched to eating basically lamb chops and meat, fish, and eggs mostly. I switched from this diet, and this diet was high in sugar. I wasn't aware of how bad sugar was, and I was drinking orange juice, which is more sugar than Coca-Cola original. And I was eating meat, fish, and eggs, but also vegetable oils. I fell for the heart-healthy nonsense. And I was eating some junk food and a lot of carbohydrate, healthy whole grains, lots of fruit, 5 a day, and fruit's sweet and tasty. Of course, it's easy. So I was eating a lot. And that's what was ruining my liver and causing all these bad metrics. Root cause solution, clear as crystal, switched to this diet. I didn't know anything about the low-carb, high-fat movement. I vaguely later realized there was an Atkins guy, but they said he was a shill and he was killing people. But I didn't know there was a whole movement. I was going straight to the database. I actually thought I was discovering this, and after I realized. But, it was fun at the time. So Meat, fish, and eggs. Coconut was in, olives were in, high-fat foods were in, butter was back, olive oil instead of vegetable oil, double cream in the coffee, no problem. Avocados, I was realizing there's all these nutrient dense, and fish, of course, very good, small fish, fatty fish. So I switched to that, cut out all the sweet stuff, because that was a no-brainer. I mean, that was just obvious as hell that sugar was the problem and not fat. And I really minimized potatoes and things, but ate vegetables. So it was a complete volte-face switch. Later, I realized I'd gone on some kind of paleo, very low-carb diet. But at the time, I didn't really know about these movements. And mostly, though, it was meat and fish. And the vegetables were thrown in on the side, but I wasn't too worried about them. And here's what happened in 6 weeks. So insulin resistance was the problem. There was my GGT, which is one of the most sinister metrics you can have high. The actuaries love GGT for life insurance. They have no skin in the game on biochemistry or nutrition. They don't care. They only care what number means you're going to die early, and then we can make sure we can get a profit on you, or you're going to live long. I'm going to make sure we charge you more. They don't care. The actuaries have papers on GGT. They love it, right? It's basically type 2 diabetes reflector. And I switched the diet, nothing else, no change in exercise or alcohol. And 6 weeks later, it dropped down into the population range. And 2 weeks later, as an engineer always does, you got to verify the trajectory, and it continued dropping down to 35, which is pretty fine. But not just that. The ferritin halved, which is another bad metric. It came down into range. The cholesterol did not drop. It actually went up. But I had now understood it's only the ratios of HDL to triglyceride that matter. And my LDL in total went up, but I knew that that was absolutely irrelevant because I'd found the papers that proved that. So I didn't worry about that. So I said, great stuff, thumbs up. Blood pressure came right down to normal with no extra exercise. And it came down and began to come down fast before the weight loss started. Before any noticeable weight loss. They say, oh, you're overweight, that's why you have high blood pressure. No. You're overweight because you're insulin resistant. You have high blood pressure because you're insulin resistant. The weight doesn't cause the blood pressure. The insulin resistance causes the blood pressure and the weight. So that's a key point. And my weight came down a lot to nearly 80 kilos at one point in 9 weeks. And the people in work were astonished. And the weights came right down. So that's when you find a dramatic, profound, all-encompassing root cause in a problem, in a process, a complex process, that kind of thing happens. You were trying to fix this metric here. You found a cause. You changed it, but the metric alone did not change. The whole process, the quality gets better everywhere. That's a real root cause, and you know you're profoundly correct when that happens. And this is a case in point. And in work, I began to give lectures. And interestingly, it's not just all those metrics. My mental energy, my joie de vivre, my productivity, everything shot up. And as engineers in work began to come to the lectures, you could see weight dropping all around the plant. And the managing director, this is a fact, we had banned all third-level education unless it directly related to our specific business. Our new CEO basically was a cost-cutting crazy guy. But our MD actually approved me if I wanted, suggested if I wanted to do a PhD in this kind of stuff. So how the hell would he do that? He nearly got in trouble for doing that. But he saw the employee engagement, he saw the change, and he saw people actually upping their game and going for management positions where before they were kind of sloppy and not motivated. So it just shows you the impact beyond the basics. So we'll show you this diagram just to beat it home, the simple realities. Insulin resistance, hyperinsulinemia, they're the same thing, two sides of a coin. Drive heart disease like nothing else, plus many of the cancers and Alzheimer's, yada, yada, yada. Unfortunately, insulin resistance decreases your HDL cholesterol, your good cholesterol, and it increases small dense LDL, and it can move around the bad LDL number. Not consistently, but it moves around. And industry jumped on this as the big thing. But they didn't realize, or when they did, it was too late because the money was being made from this. They're proxies. Cholesterol system is a proxy
for what is in truth the real deal. And the real deal, of course, is the insulin resistance, hyperinsulinemia pathology that's really driving the bus. And the ironic thing is, if an engineer looked at this and internalized it, they would say, oh my God, this is terrible. We're actually focusing on a proxy and we're missing, the real game. We're missing what's actually happening, the root cause chain, the cause and effect chain. Let's listen to the experts. So there's 5 algorithms around the world that are used to decide whether or not you should go on medication for life. So they're a big deal, 30, 40 years development in them, and you put in the cholesterol and other factors and it gives your 10-year risk for a heart attack. And therefore you can make a decision whether preventative meds are needed. So I'm going to use their algorithms and put in a guy, middle-aged male, with a super high cholesterol of 8 and an LDL of more than 5 millimole, or more than around 190 milligrams in US units. Now, these kinds of numbers in a middle-aged male, any doctor, most doctors, would see these numbers and get a shock, right? They're going to ensure that the person gets a medication prescription immediately before leaving the office, because they're going to be genuinely worried this guy could have a heart attack and it's kind of my responsibility. So the prescription will be given, the person will go out with meds. But what if I put in the numbers to their algorithms such that this person is not insulin resistant?
So you can put in no diabetes, you can put in no hypertension, like he's got good blood. You can put in the numbers such that you know that this person you're putting in is not insulin resistant. You know what the algorithms come out with? They come out with 3%, 4% risk. So 5% risk in the 10-year risk is too low to medicate. So their own algorithms validate what I'm telling you. And the other thing is, and the lady asked me in the car park this morning, the best test to find out your level of actual cardiac disease and atherosclerosis is the CAC, the coronary artery calcification scan. It doesn't involve injections. It's one quick scan. It's not always easy to get, but it tells you. It's so powerful. It predicts cardiac death and heart attacks more than all the other risk factors they use put together, and then some. It trumps everything because you see the amount of disease, so of course you know highly likely what's going to happen. But if you do get a scan and a 0, which many of these guys will get a 0, they'll have no heart disease, and they will not have in the future really. If you put that in the advanced algorithms, that 0 score, you come down at 0.9 or 1.9%. That's effectively 0. A 10-year risk for a middle-aged male down at around 1% is essentially 0 for all intents and purposes. So it just shows you their own algorithms prove it. And whenever I push that one at the cholesterol defenders online, there's always silence because there's no answer to that, right? So they just go away. I won't go through this in detail in the interest of speed, but just suffice it to say, Dr. Thomas Dayspring is the guy in cholesterol and heart disease, and he trains doctors all over America and universities. He's a lipidologist. He's basically the ultimate cholesterol expert, and he works with pharma a lot. He takes in a lot of money from pharma, right, for his courses. But he admitted to me in 2014, kind of by mistake, he essentially admitted when I was goading him on Twitter and I was kind of setting him up, and he did admit it. In reality, the majority of heart attacks are due to insulin resistance. And LDL, bad cholesterol, is a useless predictor for cardiovascular issues unless it's way up over 5, right? Which is not really true, but he said it. So again, top expert in the world and a pharma guy. So how important is blood insulin? This study I love. It basically showed that in Colombian men who had a heart attack, they did a great study and said, we're going to follow them for 7 years, and we're going to measure all their bloods at the start, and we're going to get a full profile of all of them, and we'll watch and see who gets a second heart attack. And then at the end of 7 years, we can look at the data and say, well, what was the thing to watch to know that you're going to have a second heart attack? So it's huge. So what they saw, like in all the studies, I've loads of them I won't show, there was no predictive power of LDL or total cholesterol for a second heart attack. It was just non-significant. There was no risk multiplier. And this happens all the time, and you don't hear about it. And high blood pressure, if you had a higher blood pressure at the start, you would double the chance of being one of the guys to have a second heart attack. That makes sense. Blood pressure is a problem. But high insulin, how predictive was that of a second heart attack? Nearly 7 times more likely if your insulin was high. So any engineer would know, or layperson to be honest, oh, obviously you got to be watching your insulin. Yeah, obviously. And just a quick point, and Dr. David Unwin has done lovely papers on this and others. Most high blood pressure in the West, because it doesn't happen in indigenous humans anywhere in the world, their blood pressure never goes up. It just doesn't happen because they're not insulin resistant. That's it. Insulin resistance causes salt retention in the kidneys and drives up your blood pressure. So I often say to people, if in the morning we only had meat, fish, and eggs, there was no other food, anti-hypertensive market would be gone in 3 months, and many pharma companies would shut down. If you could only eat meat, fish, and eggs, you cannot maintain hypertension. Hypertension that's 50 or 60% of adults over 60, that's just going to fall off the map. You know, these are the bizarre, simple truths.